Okay, Dennis Young here, Primitive Substance, and very special guest, Sid Smith, freelance author, writer, and a huge fan of King Crimson. Plus, he's did this Northstars. We're going to talk about that. So, Sid, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me, Dennis. Great to be
So,
here.
I've been watching your blog and watching you on the King Crimson site and all your amazing stuff. But I think we want to talk about this book first and
Yeah.
your how you got interested in King Crimson. When did that happen?
I guess my interest in King Crimson kind of really begins kind of sometime about 1970, 71, something like that.
Okay.
And I got into it because of my sister's record collection, and Court of the Crimson King. And it was that right, like that was the first thing I ever heard. Um, but then I think but I didn't see the band until
Hmm.
1972. I
Okay.
missed them in 1971, but made up for it in 72 when the lineup with Jamie Muir, John Wetton, Bill Bruford, David,
Oh wow.
Robert Fripp went on a UK tour, and it was that gig was extraordinary. I it was. I know it's a I know it's a cliche. People say, "Oh, that gig
Yeah.
changed my life," but that gig changed my life. I had not.
I imagine it would.
You have to remember that the music that the band was presenting. It was a new band. They hadn't
Mm.
released anything before, so the couple of thousand people that packed into Newcastle Odeon, the town where I lived, had not heard any of this music at all. And Crimson played what
Mm.
we would later recognise as probably most of Lark's Tongues and Aspic. And then all these other numbers, which at the time,
Mm.
we didn't realise were improvisations.
Oh
Um,
man, yeah.
I mean, me and my pals, we just thought, wow, this is a wild number, and I don't know what it's called. But and then at the end of the night, so there was about, I don't know, there was a kind of an hour and a half maybe of all this extraordinary music, and of course
Mm.
there was also an intensely visual aspect to the gig
Oh really? I didn't know that.
in in
Oh well, Jamie
in the
Muir
shape of
must have really been.
Jamie Muir, who,
Yeah.
whilst everyone else on stage was relatively static, Robert sitting down,
Right.
and John Wetton standing, and David Cross is a bit active with the violin, but but Jamie Muir is all over the place, like waving his arm, like hitting all sorts of
Mm.
weird sounding things, percussion. So that was an extraordinary barrage of strange
I
sounds,
imagine.
odd visuals. It was kind of almost. I mean, I didn't think this at the time. This is all in retrospect. I guess it was kind of highly stylized movements, which
Mm.
seemed to be utterly spontaneous, but probably weren't. And at the end of the night, after about an hour and a half of this, they played the one
Mm.
song that everybody in the audience recognised, which was the encore, which was 21st Century Schizoid Man, and
Oh man, what
it
an
was
ending.
it was kind of a very cathartic experience. There was this normally when you go to see a band, especially when you're a teenager like I was, seeing a band in concert, any band, it doesn't matter what the band is, seeing a good band in concert is a very intense
Right, right.
experience for audiences. I think
Yeah.
everyone who's ever seen a band will recognize there's a couple of factors happen. You've got music happening,
Right.
but it's a very physical experience seeing a band. When
Mm.
it's a big band coming through a PA,
Right. I'm
when
sure.
you have somebody like John Wetton pump the bass, it hits you. You know, I mean, physically hits you. The sound
Oh,
waves.
yeah.
You know, they kind of
He
knock
was
you.
amazing. Basically, I know.
Yeah. So it's this Crimson for me was this. Now, bearing in mind, Dennis, I had seen, you know, I'd been to quite a few gigs by then, even though I was still relatively young. I was 15 or 16 or something, and I'd seen Pink Floyd, I'd seen Led Zeppelin a couple of times, I'd seen
Mm.
bands like Free, Rory Gallagher, blues guitarist in the UK that
Oh,
people
yeah, they
will
were
know,
great.
Deep Purple, Uriah Heep. I'd even seen Mountain
Mm.
on a UK tour from the US. And the thing about
Mm.
all of those groups, maybe, well, no, even including Pink Floyd, you know, these were big bands. They were loud. They were heavy, but they were all kind of. You could relate them in some way back to the blues. You know, even though it may be a kind of
Right.
a
I,
kind of an
I agree.
extended thing, but from the blues. But they were all kind of blues rock based. Crimson did something completely different. And when the soundboard tape materialized about 40 years later, and I had the weird job of writing the sleeve notes for a gig
Wow.
that I was at, and it happened to be my first King
Wow. That's
Crimson
even better
ever.
yet.
That was weird, but um, what was what was obvious at the time, but even more extraordinary all the years later, was just how unrelated Crimson were to the standard milieu of rock bands, UK rock bands,
Mm.
which were, as I say, kind of roughly, approximately blues based. And Crimson were doing something else which drew upon other disciplines, other types of music that you didn't generally hear. The nearest band that sounded a bit like Crimson to me was a German band that I'd seen earlier
Mm.
called Can, who of course are,
Oh,
you
I
know,
know them very well.
yeah, of
Oh,
course.
yeah.
And Can, you know, Can did long improvised passages within their music. Although I have to say, and this is not a criticism of Can, I love Can, but Can's music was relatively static. Crimson's music, by comparison, in terms of its improvisational style, was
Okay.
incredibly dynamic. And it was dynamic because you had Jamie Muir on the one hand, but you also had Bill Bruford on the other.
Oh, right. Right.
So, you know, it's kind of being almost led by the drumming. And of course, years later, you know, 4 or 5 decades later, when you have a King Crimson with 3 drummers,
Oh,
literally leading from the
oh, I
front of the.
know. I saw that tour. Those tours. It was incredible.
But and
But
in one sense,
you even
it
had
was ever. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
you had David Cross with Robert Fripp. I mean, those two together were just made it even more intense. And you had the Mellotron
Mm.
added to that. What a show that must have been.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was. It was an amazing show, and it what was interesting. Um, I mean, it was interesting to me. Whether or not it's interesting to anybody who watches this, I don't know. But um, so I
I'm
saw them
sure it
in the.
is.
I saw them in the November or December of 1972, um, and Lark's Tongues and Aspic hadn't been recorded at that point. It was recorded in the January and February, and it was released in the March. And I bought it on
Mm.
the day it came out. I bought 2 albums that day. The day it came out, I bought Lark's Tongues and Aspic, and I bought Roxy Music's For Your Pleasure from the same shop. And what was between the November, let's say, when I saw the band live, and the and the March when it was released, I I kept the music. There was a few phrases. Bearing in mind, I
Mm.
didn't know what these tunes were. There were a
Right.
few musical phrases which I kept churning over in my mind. They had a big impact on me, and there was something so wonderful about putting the LP on, and there's that piece of music. They played that bit live, and piecing it together. It was immensely rewarding hearing the album. Finally, after all that time, it was like, maybe 4 or 5 months between seeing it live, hearing it live, and keeping the memory of it alive.
Right.
The one postscript I'd add to that experience, Dennis, was kind of before anything happened on stage. There was music playing over the PA, and there's nothing unusual about that. It was common practice back then, as it is now. But what was interesting about it was this music was kind of drifting over the PA at a relatively low volume, and I think we'd read there'd been something like I remember reading in one of the music papers that we had in the UK, that Brian Eno, or Eno as we called him then, had been working with Robert Fripp. And at the time, there was some speculation, probably only amongst me and my friends, that, Brian Eno might be joining King Crimson,
Oh, wow.
Of course, that was just teenage speculation. But what we worked out was, we thought, what's this we're listening to? Because it was this gorgeous flowing guitar thing. And of course, that would later be released. Of course, that was No Pussyfooting. This was side one of Fripp and Eno's No Pussyfooting. So we not only got this brand new band, but we got a piece of music playing over the PA that I think had only been recorded a couple of months before that and had not yet been released. So there was a lot going on, and for me that was you wrap up that whole experience. It was astonishing time, and it still resonates with me. All these years later.
Yeah. Now, as a side note, I spoke with Bill McCormick, who was in Matching Mole.
Yeah.
What a fantastic guy. If you get a chance, take a look at the interviews I did with him.
Yeah.
But he told me that Robert Fripp produced the second Matching Mole record, and supposedly that's where he met Brian Eno.
Yeah. Robert Fripp Robert Wyatt had asked Robert Fripp to come in and produce the album. Not everybody in the band was necessarily that happy about that outcome. And there is a story about how Phil Miller, the guitarist out of Matching Mole, who is a wonderful player, sadly no longer with us. Phil Miller was somewhat or felt a little bit intimidated. He had to do an overdub of a particular solo with everybody watching him, and I think there was some talk about Robert Fripp watching him and so on. But yes, you're right. Bill's absolutely right. During that session, which I think was in the I haven't got a note of this in front of me. I'm just doing it off the top of my head, so I may be wrong. But it was something like the June.
72?
In 72. It was the June of 72 or the July of 72. You got to remember, this is King Crimson. The new version of King Crimson was already forming, although it hadn't formally played at that point. And one of the sessions invited Brian Eno in through I think Bill McCormick, and I think it was Bill's invite, and Brian came in with his VCS3 synthesizer and performed on the track. Is it Gloria Gloom? I think it is from that album.
Yes.
So they were, of course. The other thing was that the other connection was that Roxy Music. I'm sure everybody knows these stories, but just in case they don't.
Right, sure.
Roxy Music had an association with King Crimson's managers, John Gaydon and David Enthoven, or EG, as they were more widely known. because Roxy Music were signed to EG Management, but they were only signed to EG Management because a year previous to that, Brian Ferry had auditioned for King Crimson.
Oh, okay.
And Brian Ferry, Robert tells the story that Brian Ferry wasn't right for King Crimson, but he gave Brian Ferry EG Management's telephone number and suggested that he should
Oh, okay.
ring EG. So at the time when Matching Wall are recording their album, Roxy Music are with EG Management, and so Robert and Brian Eno would have inevitably met because
Right, right. I see that.
they shared the same management offices. So it was kind of they got on. They had a lot in common, although they were musically very different in terms of the day-to-day business of being a musician. They had several meeting points in EG's office on the King's Road. So and thank goodness they did, because
you're right, exactly. I agree.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's made a whole difference. I mean, these were groundbreaking musicians and bands, and that period was so, from, I would say, the Sgt. Pepper era all the way on to like the end of the 70s. Such a magical period in British music, with even in America, but especially those bands.
I think that's right.
I
think. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I the picture's freezing. So I might be running slow. Or you're.
That's okay. No problem.
You'll have to do it in the edit.
That's all right.
I think it's always tempting, isn't it, to say, to look at a particular period of music and say, oh, this was the best period, or this was the most interesting period. And I understand why we have to resist those kinds of generalizations. However, there is something to be said that about this period, which is that it was unprecedented.
That's the word, right?
There wasn't the bands that were working, from the 60s onwards. The vocabulary that they shared or had come from, comes from a quite a traceable line, as we've already said, blues.
Right.
There would be other things that they come from. However, the language that they develop and extrapolate from those influences, nobody was doing it. They weren't drawing on a precedent. They were creating something brand new, thanks partly, of course, to the convergence of technology enabled sort of artistic developments, the likes of which it would have been impossible to do some of the things that were being done in the late 60s, say in the late 40s or the early 1950s or the mid 1950s even. So so I think the reason why a lot of that music is of interest to this day is it's underpinned to a great extent by a very, very creative experimentation. So you get a period where the 3-minute song or the 2-minute song becomes elasticated, and sometimes that doesn't always work. And it would be wrong to say that everything that was produced in the creative flowering of the if you want to date it from the 1960s through into the 70s, it would be foolish to say that everything that was done then is marvelous, because it isn't. But a lot of it is. a lot of it still stands up, and I think that
it does, and that's it. And how young these guys were, these musicians. The early Genesis records, and that too. King Crimson. You had Von de Graaff Generator.
Yeah. Well, they're all.
As far as the Prague goes, it was just amazing amount of talent.
I was in London last week at an event with the writers Joe Kendall and another writer called Mike Barnes. Mike Barnes, actually, you should get him on your program.
Okay.
He wrote a really great book called. He wrote a great biography of Captain Beefheart, for one thing. But he wrote
Okay.
that, which is a weighty tome, as they say in
Oh,
the
I got to look for
business.
that.
And anyway, Mike Barnes and Joe Kendall and I were at an event in London last week where we were celebrating the 55th anniversary of In the Court of the Crimson King. And one of the things that, it's just a simple fact that this album, Court of the Crimson King, sounds, it's a debut album and it sounds incredibly polished. It sounds like the band had been around forever, but they hadn't. They'd been around for a few months. It wasn't like they'd been working together for a year or something and then recorded their first album. They'd been working together for less than 6 months by the time they recorded that first album. And the point I'm making in relation to something you've just said is that the average age of that band was 22, 23. I mean, the oldest person in that band, excluding Peter Sinfield, the lyricist and lights guy, the oldest guy in that band was Michael Giles.
Right. And how could you not say, look at that?
Yeah.
There's the cover.
Yeah.
Amazing cover.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody's not ever seen this or get it, pick it up. It's one of the most remarkable records.
Yeah, I agree. It's not my favorite King Crimson album, but it is. As I say, I was in London last week celebrating this thing, and we did a playback of the entire album in sequence, and it stands up incredibly well.
It does. So, how did you get involved with Robert and everybody in the inner circle of King Crimson? How did that happen?
Well, the quick version of that is I was really just like a general fan. There was on the internet. It was really through the internet initially. There was a message board called Elephant Talk. And Elephant Talk, I mean, like a few people I know, I bought my very first home computer in order to get onto the internet in order to read a King Crimson message board.
Dial-up service, right? Waiting for that thing to dial up, right?
I travelled down to London. I live up in the northeast of England, about 250 miles away from London. And I travelled down. King Crimson had organised a playback event to launch then a new live archive album called The Night Watch. I travelled down previously, the year before, when they launched Epitaph, the 4 CD box set of the 1969 band.
Right.
A year later, they did The Night Watch, which was the band without Jamie Muir, and that was a live event. And I approached a table where all the guys in the band were signing the book, the CD covers, and my turn came up to with Robert, and we had a very brief, because in those situations, you can't do much talking, So I can't remember how it came into conversation, but I think Elephant Talk came into the conversation, the message board, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, "Oh, do you post on Elephant Talk?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Oh, what's your name?" So I gave him a name, Sid Smith, and he said, I've read some of your posts on Elephant Talk. And he was at the end of the table, and he sort of indicated that I should move round but stay, because he wanted to pick up a point about something I'd written on on Elephant Talk. And funny enough, the thing I'd written on Elephant Talk was about the recording of Matching Wall's second LP, True Story.
Oh.
And he kind of filled in while there was a queue of people like me getting autographs. He sort of filled me in on some of the detail about the making of the album that I'd got wrong in my post. And he wasn't you know, wagging his finger at me. He was just sort of saying, well, you might be interested to know that, blah, 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 blah. So that was that, really. And that was my first sort of proper thing with Robert. And then the next time, so that was 97, a few months later, I got a call from a lovely woman called Diane Aldal, who doesn't work for DGM anymore, but did at the time. And she rang me up and said, Project One are playing at the London Jazz Cafe. Would you like to come and do the merchandise table? So the quick version is I said yes. And I came to London for 4 days and I ran the merchandise table and got to... so that's a very long-winded way of answering your question, how I got to...
That's a great story.
And then the final bit of it was Robert was in London one time doing the launch of the 30th anniversary edition of In the Court of the Crimson King.
Oh, wow.
CD. Right. And I just went down. And by then I'd decided to write a book about King Crimson. And so I thought I better tell Robert. And when he finished doing his talk, we said hello, and then we went for a cup of tea, for a chat. And I said to him, I'm thinking of writing a book about King Crimson. And he said again, a rough paraphrase, he says, don't do that. Nobody's interested. Nobody will read it. Nobody will buy it. And nobody will publish it. And I sort of said, well, I don't know. I'm going to give it a go. And he said, oh, well, okay. And that was that.
That's funny.
So that's the answer to that's a very long answer to a short question.
So here is I've read this book a couple times. Now you said there's a new edition now, right? You were showing
there is.
And can the people watching buy it, right, online?
Yeah. You can.
And that looks like, and you were showing me it's twice as big. There's more.
So that's the old edition.
More pages to it.
Yeah, that's the old edition, which is the one you've got and read. And this came out in 2001.
Okay.
But for the 50th anniversary of the band, so this was in 2019, a revised edition, which if I just kind of put the two side by side, as the observant person will notice that
that is a lot more pages.
The newer edition has a bit more, twice as big. Yeah, has a bit more going on. Despite the fact despite the fact it uses a much smaller font. And that's because over the years, so this one was published in, where is it? There it is. This one was published in 2001, and it's had about 3 or 4 reprints, but then fell out of print. And I kind of got asked to do an update on it. Kind of hardly a month would go by when I didn't get quite a few emails saying, I can't get the book, is it in print? And this for a while became very expensive to buy on the second-hand market. So anyway, long story short, we got this version out as a way of beating kind of people selling this book for hundreds of pounds. Stupid money. I mean, nobody should buy anything for hundreds of pounds, really. And it was the idea was to it was the 50th anniversary, so to kind of try and tie everything up as it would be at that time. And of course, with anything, the original edition ended in 2001, 2002, I guess, with the band being a quartet at the time, just about going out on tour. And in this edition, it kind of ends with a very different lineup and significantly expanded. Also,
And that includes the seven-piece lineup with the 3 drummers.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Pat Mastellato says hello.
Oh, right.
I'm gonna be interviewing him soon. So
well, that's lovely. Pat Mastellato was one of my favorite musicians. He's a phenomenal force, and I think he's one of the most underrated members of King Crimson. I think Pat's contribution to King Crimson over the years. I mean, Pat is now, or became, King Crimson's longest-serving drummer.
I didn't know that.
And his contribution to King Crimson tends to be overshadowed a little bit, perhaps understandably, when you're following in the footsteps of Michael Giles, and then of course Bill Bruford.
That's hard, yeah.
And then later on, of course, you've got Gavin Harrison in the band as well. So King
Crimson tough to follow. You're right.
Yeah, King Crimson attracts great drummers, of which I happen to think Pat is one of the best.
Absolutely.
I love his work. One of the things I remember, in 1998, I was lucky enough to be invited to go on tour with Project 4 when they played. They just played the West Coast of the United States, and I was working the merch table. And Pat Mastellato, watching Pat play, bearing in mind he was playing Roland V drums, which he didn't really want to play. They weren't his favorite kind of drums, but that was the trajectory that Robert had outlined. So that's what Pat did.
Right.
But in addition to playing drums real time, he was also triggering samples and electronic effects, and that in itself, isn't entirely remarkable. But what he was also doing, I noticed one of the nights he was sampling things live on the fly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Kind of getting them to come back whilst triggering, whilst drumming. I mean, it was.
That is remarkable.
I just thought, wow, that's a hard-working guy.
That is.
And incredibly creative too. And the other guy out of King Crimson who I think deserves much more credit than he is given from that period is Trey Gunn, who came in with the double trio. Trey Gunn is a phenomenal musician. I think his musicality is so underrated. And in early when the double trio incarnation of Crimson comes about, Trey, a lot of audience members at the time are saying, well, I don't really know what Trey Gunn's doing because I can't really hear him, and he just seems to be doing what Tony Levin's doing. And I heard that opinion voiced quite a few times, and it's true that actually on those that first tour that the double trio did, Trey was mixed down in the live mix.
I didn't. Okay.
But the other thing that people made the mistake regarding Trey Gunn, they would hear a sound and they would assume it was emanating from Robert Fripp, but it wasn't. Right. It's emanating from Trey Gunn. It's just that Trey Gunn has the chops, has the music.
Yeah, he does.
He has the musical dexterity to match whatever Robert's doing, and so he's his work in King Crimson is phenomenal. For me, one of the brightest moments on the you're wearing the Construction of Light T-shirt.
Oh yeah, this was a great tour. Great tour.
For me, one of the brightest moments on that particular album is actually the bonus track.
I have to agree. I totally agree. That's an intense track.
That for me, it's the best track on the
album.
It
is. I agree.
There are a couple of other tracks which are pretty good, but for me, that's the best track, and it's no accident.
It really.
It's written. Sorry, it's not written, but it's kind of arranged and produced by Pat Mastelotto and Trey Gunn.
Yes, it really builds up too. It's a build-up piece. It's so it is.
And there's a great sense of drama within that piece.
Yes, there is.
And it's kind of, you've got the official album being recorded upstairs in Adrian's studio, and downstairs after the official sessions finish, downstairs in a garage, you've got and later on in post-production at Pat's own studios, you've got Trey Gunn and Pat Mastelotto essentially recording a different album, Project X, and the inclusion of Heaven and Earth on that album. I kind of I just think it's a marvelous.
I never thought anybody would pick that too, but I have to agree that when I listen to that record, that's the first song I put on. It's really just. Now I was a short story. I saw David Sylvan play with Robert, Pat, and Trey.
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal show. It was in New York, and that's the first time I saw Trey Gunn and Pat Mastelotto play, and I was very impressed.
Yeah.
With their playing.
It had Michael Brooks on guitar as well in the band. Yeah.
Did you see that tour at all?
Yeah.
Did you see the David Sylvan tour?
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
I loved it. It was my confession is that I didn't know really much about David Sylvian at all.
I didn't either.
I mean, I knew a couple of things. I'd heard the band Japan a couple of times, and didn't mind it. But I really I travelled to up from Newcastle in the northeast of England up into Scotland to they were playing Glasgow, and I didn't really know what to expect. But it had been, I guess that was 93, something like that.
Yes. Yep. Here, 94.
Yeah. And I was really interested to hear what Robert Fripp was doing. But also you had Trey Gunn. And that was the first time I saw Trey Gunn and Pat Mastelotto.
Right.
They were a phenomenally good band.
And what I loved about that tour, Robert was right up front. He was right up front, burning on guitar, just like doing these amazing runs. It was my top 5 shows of all time. Is that show. Let's move on a little bit. What about the Northstars here? So, what about Northstars? Now, you did some kind of profile. Is that with different artists? Can you talk about that a little bit? Co-authored that?
Yeah, I did a. There was a local publisher. There was a publisher got in touch with me. The local TV station, commercial TV station, had a series called Northstars, and they had and what that would be they would interview artists that had a Northeast connection, a Newcastle connection. So there would be Brian Ferry, Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, basically anybody who with a Northeast connection, and they would have a two-hander kind of where they were being interviewed. And what the publisher wanted was a kind of a TV tie-in type of book. And the guy who was going to write it originally became unwell, and the producer of the show had intended to write it as well, but he got involved in something else, and the publisher was left with the need to get a book out, and so they contacted me to kind of. They had some of the raw material in the shape of the interviews. So there was, in some cases, there was a series of transcribed interviews. And I was basically given a set of transcribed interviews for some of them.
Okay.
And something like 72 hours to
Oh
knock
my
it out.
gosh.
And it was horrible.
Imagine. Oh.
And it's the kind of thing I look back on and think, why on earth did I do that? And
Oh boy.
I mean, I got paid to do it, so it's not like I made some money out of the thing. The publisher and I agreed a price, and in the end, of course, I'm thinking, well, I probably the price I agreed was probably way too low.
Oh boy.
Had I known of the pain and terror that doing the thing would induce, but it went out, and I think by the time the publisher got the finished book out, it had the TV tie-in was like way past. It was like 2 or 3 years past the thing. So it was a lot of rushing about.
Oh boy.
But
I never liked that.
For almost no reason, But somewhere every now and again a copy will turn up. It's got one of the worst covers I've ever seen. But
oh boy.
But they're I mean. Obviously, I don't have anything to do with that side of it, so it's not my taste. But yeah, I've never done anything like that since, and I'm glad to say.
Now, what now the blogs you did? Are you ever going to put that in a book?
No,
all those, no.
I
They're
think
fantastic.
I haven't really. I mean, I used to blog a lot back in the day when blogs were kind of. It was part of there was something very exciting about blogging.
Right.
And then really with the advent of social media, kind of it pulled the rug out from underneath blogging.
Yeah.
So, for example, I used to have a blog which was called Postcards from the Yellow Room because my office at the time was yellow. It would notch up. On a weekly basis, it would notch up, real significant numbers of hits, unique one-off hits, and also quite a lot of repeating viewers. So it felt like a really vibrant platform.
Right.
But with the advent of I can't remember what came first. Maybe it was Facebook, maybe it was MySpace, maybe it was something else. But anyway, social media collectively kind of killed blogs off for me. And I saw readership levels kind of, just literally fall off a cliff, So I think it's still up there, but I haven't blogged for, like 10 years or something. It's kind of it's still out there, but I think there's at one point there might have been a temptation to try and anthologize some of it, but not really. I'm quite happy to I'm busy enough with bits and pieces of work that come in. I'm in the lucky position of being able to only do the jobs now that I want to do.
That's good. That's great.
And I don't have to chase jobs, to kind of earn a crust,
Are you still working with Robert King Crimson? Are you still working with Robert on the website, or is that
Yeah, no, I mean,
not happening?
only
Oh, that's good.
we're recording this on a Wednesday, and yesterday, Tuesday, I just completed a set of show notes for a
Hmm.
1982 King Crimson gig that's going to go out and be available for download on the King Crimson website next week. I've also just done some show notes for.
Have you heard about the Beat Tour?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I
So
mean,
have you
that's
heard of what? I've seen some clips of it. That boy, that it really looks great.
yeah. I mean, I
I didn't
think
get a chance to see them, but uh,
yeah,
when
yeah.
you got Tony Levin there, Tony Levin and Adrian Belew, you can't go wrong. And then those two other great players.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
Danny Carey's a hell of a drummer as well,
oh, he is.
and of course Steve Vai, a very respected player, and I never saw the 1982. Oh, sorry, I never saw the 1980s version of King Crimson. So they kind of so the last version of King Crimson I saw before the double trio in 1994, 5. Sorry, the last version of King Crimson I saw was in 1974. 1973.
Oh, wow.
So it was the 80s band never came anywhere near me. And at the time, I never got to London, which would have been the nearest. I never got to
Hmm.
see them, so they were. So I guess for a lot of people, I know the '80s band has a particular strong foothold in the United States,
Yes, it does.
and so I guess for a lot of people going to see Beat. Um, it will be a quite an intense experience where it's not King Crimson, but it's something that's about as close as you're going to get.
Right, right. Now, what do you think of the AI now with music and the current direction that you think music is headed right now? With in association with AI and all these bands, home people at home making music. It's such a flood of so much stuff.
It well, the music has never been as ubiquitous as it is now, and everybody now has the ability. Um, that there's a recording studio on my iPhone.
That's
Uh,
right.
you
You're
know,
right.
I think I've got a version of GarageBand on my iPhone. I've certainly got a video editor on my iPhone.
Right.
So that kind of that ability has really opened the floodgates, and in one sense, that's great. It's great that people who otherwise might have struggled, to get their music out there, they've now got a distribution platform. The downside is there's just too much for any of it to really land
Right. That's true.
in any significant way. And of course, being a musician in this day and age it's virtually impossible to make a living. All of the I write. I've written for the last few years.
Hmm.
I've written for all the UK magazines, but
Oh, okay.
I've mostly written for a UK magazine called
I know that one. Yep.
and which incidentally also has an advert for the latest
Oh,
King
there you
Crimson
go.
offerings,
There you go.
which I wrote the liner notes for
Is,
the 50th anniversary of Red. But
is
the
that the
thing
new edition of the Prague
that yes,
magazine?
that's the very latest edition. Yeah,
Okay.
and I guess it takes for some reason it takes a long time for it to arrive in the States, but um, the great thing is, it's very hard for people to make a living as a musician these days. And very
Right.
often over the last 10, 15 years or however long I've been writing for Prog Magazine, I've interviewed a lot of musicians, some with, who did their work in the 1960s, but a lot of people mostly who are working right now, and almost all of them have to rely on music. Making music isn't their first means of earning a living, because it's the economics of that now are so perilous.
You're right, they are.
You know, why anybody would form a band and do a short tour when people, when you know, the price of petrol, the price of you know, rehearsal space, the price of getting from A to B, and then the uncertainty as to whether or not people are going to turn out, and
That's another
come and
thing.
see you. And the kind of thing that you know, really kills it for bands is, you know, back in the day, this isn't a complaint, it's just a fact of life, that back in the day, if I wanted to hear a new album by somebody, there was only really two, well, possibly three ways of listening to it. One was to go out and buy it. But if you couldn't afford to go out and buy it, and I often couldn't, then hopefully a friend would have it. And if a friend didn't have it, then there would be maybe a track of it might be on the radio or something.
Right.
But whereas now, of course, you know, everything's there, and you just click and bang, then it comes. And the person who, you know, the shareholders for Spotify and the CEO for Spotify, they're the people earning the money. It's not the musician.
They are.
There seems to be something wrong. And to sort of address your point about AI, I mean, you know, every new wave of technology comes with challenges and opportunities.
I agree.
And there are some aspects of new technology. For example, demixing some of the Beatles mono recordings. You know, I've been to Abbey Road and I've heard that process in the room, and it sounds amazing. The fact that you can train the computer, the software, to give us the clarification around a George Harrison guitar part that previously, you know, was just lost in the bounce down.
Right.
So that's great. On the other hand, you can also just, I had somebody, I'm not making this up, somebody contacted me the other day, and they wanted to know if I wanted to listen to their AI recreation of Italian prog rock.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, kind of, I didn't, because not because I've got any moral standpoint, but just I don't have time. But also kind of like, well, yeah, you can now have, so if you want, I don't know, Robert Fripp on a Cyndi Lauper album, well, you can train the AI to give you that sound, if that's what you want.
Right.
Is that good? Is that a good thing?
Well, I don't know. I think the attention span too. I think everybody's kind of guilty of it. We're going on our phones a lot. We're distracted with the phone. We're looking at it. The world's in the distracted place now.
Yeah.
Because of the smartphone.
Definitely.
I grew up without the phone, so maybe I different world like you do.
Yeah.
So maybe we see it differently as kids do that are born into it, where they're like, you know, it's the way it is. This is the world we're living. It's amazing how fast technology has moved. I mean, who knows what's next, right?
Yeah. I mean, complaining about it always feels a little bit awkward, because
it does. You're right.
Like you become the old man shouting at the clouds, you know.
Right. These old farts, you know, they're going to hear this and say, oh man, that guy's old, you know. That's all right. But listen, Sid, this has been a great interview. I want to thank you really for doing it. And
thank you.
Where can we get your book now? Is it on your website, or how do you want to send it back to me where to get it, or if you want to say it now too?
Well, you can buy it from www.burningshed.com. The Burning Shed are are a great
Okay.
artist friendly mail order business in the UK. I don't know. Tim Bowness from Norman is one of the people who runs it. So
Okay.
it's run very much with musicians in mind.
That's what that's great to hear. Yeah, because I'm going to go get another copy. I want the new edition. I've had this since 2004. When
Yeah,
it first came out, I bought it, and I go
yeah,
back to it
yeah.
because it's such a fascinating story about such an amazing
It's
band that you're part of and have done a great job with, the words and blogs, and we really appreciate it. All our fans out here.
okay.
So, all right,
Thank you.
okay, Sid. Pleasure talking to you. Have a good night there in the UK.
Cheers, Dennis.
Take care.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.